We are here today to honour all Australians and New Zealanders who have served their country in times of war. We do this today because the original ANZACs landed on the beach at Gallipoli in Turkey on Sunday the 25th of April 1915 at around 4:30 a.m. 105 years ago. Since then, the 25th of April has been known as ANZAC Day. Australians and New Zealanders take time on this day to remember those who served and to honour the sacrifices they made in our name. The ANZACs also landed together with the British, Indian and French soldiers. ANZAC. These 5 letters stand for the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. ANZAC, and the men and women who were in that corps came to be known as ANZACs. The Gallipoli campaign began on the 17th of February 1915 and concluded on the 9th of January 1916, some 11 months. On ANZAC Day, it requires us to reflect on the past with pride. We salute not only the spirit of the ANZACs, but in paying tribute to them, we take the opportunity to dedicate ourselves to striving for our country as they did and upholding their finest qualities of courage, comradeship, unselfishness, commitment to duty, tenacity of spirit, humour, endurance and mateship. History shows that, for a peace-loving nation, we have been formally adversary when stirred to action, and also remarkably successful at the business of war. On every occasion when Australians and New Zealanders have been called upon to protect freedom, they have done so generously, effectively and efficiently. Every nation remembers some past event, some battle or some defining moment. Our defining moment came in 1915 at Gallipoli. The young men of Gallipoli were the first ANZACs. They were ordinary young Australians and New Zealanders doing their best in a long campaign of intense ferocity. In December 1915, the ANZACs were evacuated from this miserable campaign. And by then, some staggering figures for our small populations. Australia's population was some 5 million. About 8,700 Australians had been killed and 19,500 wounded. New Zealand's population, some 1 million. About 2,800 New Zealanders had been killed and 5,200 wounded. The Ottoman Empire lost 86,500 and some 164,500 wounded. One Australian soldier who landed in the second wave wrote an account of the fighting in his diary in 1915. Landed at Gallipoli Peninsula on Sunday the 25th of April under heavy shell and rifle fire. Got straight into action and it was hell. God knows how the shells poured over us while the bullets from the enemy rifles poured into us. What a day of sorrow, men shattered to pieces, and oh the sight and the sorrow, poor fellows left on the field to die all through a wet and cold night. Many missing this morning, officers dead. God knows how many left alive tonight, but we must go on until we beat them. In total, 130,000 of all Allied and Turkish soldiers died as a result of the 11-month-long Gallipoli campaign. The Gallipoli campaign was a failure. Yet of all the battlefields on which Australians have died, it is the disastrous Gallipoli campaign that has come to symbolise the Australian and New Zealand ANZAC tradition. The home front. We must remember all those who contributed on the home front, supplying material and moral support to the Australians serving overseas. The sacrifices made by families who cared for their loved ones who returned home with physical injuries and mental illnesses should also be remembered. For them, the effects of the war often lasted for decades. Their work was usually carried out in the privacy of their family home, and they received no public recognition or reward, and there was no Department of Veteran Affairs nor Centrelink in those days. The pride and grief of Australia and New Zealand followed Gallipoli formed a bond so strong that it made a statement to the world that we had come of age, and by coming together on the 25th of April each year, this spirit of unity is rekindled. We must not forget today's veterans, the young men and women who have returned from duty in places like Korea, Vietnam, Timor-Leste, Afghanistan, Iraq and Solomon Islands. ANZAC Day is a day to remember all the men and women of the Australian and New Zealand Defence Forces, regardless of the time they served. As the ANZAC Day ceremony ends, you will hear a bugle play, The Last Post. This piece of music was originally played in military camps to mark the end of the day and announce that all soldiers should be resting. In many memorial services, the last post symbolises that the duty of the dead is over and they can rest in peace. Today, the total of all deaths to date is 102,900 Australians. We observe 1 minute's silence after the last post. During this time, one might like to close one's eyes and think about all the men and women who have served Australia in times of war and conflict, and about all those who have died. The ANZAC spirit exists in each of us, so therefore let us be guided by the ANZAC spirit in facing today, the national and personal challenges immediately ahead.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them, lest we forget.